The silence in the grand, meticulously decorated living room was often more deafening than any argument. Sarah sat on the plush velvet sofa, her hands clasped over her slightly swollen belly. The faint flutter of life within her, the only warmth in the cavernous space. Across from her, Mark, her husband of 5 years, scrolled through his tablet, his jawline sharp, his expression a familiar mask of indifference. He didn't look up, didn't acknowledge her presence. Even as she cleared her throat, a small, hopeful gesture. "Mark," she began, her voice soft, almost a whisper in the vast room. "I was thinking, maybe we could pick out some names for the baby tonight or look at cribs." "Of course." "It's okay," he snapped, his temper growing shorter with each new setback. "It's just a rough patch. Competitors. Probably. Or maybe Sarah. No, that's ridiculous. She's nothing. She has nothing." He dismissed the thought as quickly as it arose, unable to fathom that the woman he had discarded could possess any power over him. It was like blaming a mosquito for a hurricane. His thumb paused on the screen. He let out a low, humorless chuckle, a sound that always sent a chill down her spine. Finally, he lifted his gaze, his eyes, once so full of a charm that had captivated her, now cold and dismissive. "Names. Cribs," he scoffed, setting the tablet down with a deliberate click. "Sarah, do you ever think about anything beyond this house and domestic trivialities?" But the evidence mounted. A major investor, who had promised a significant capital injection, suddenly pulled out, citing concerns about recent financial irregularities in Mark's company. Mark was stunned. Irregularities. His books were clean, or so he thought. He demanded an explanation, but the investor simply stated, "Information has come to light that gives us pause." Her heart sank. This was their dance, a cruel, repetitive waltz of his contempt and her desperate attempts to bridge the growing chasm between them. For 5 years, she had poured her entire being into their marriage, into making this house a home, into supporting his burgeoning career. She had given up her own aspirations, her dreams of a design career, because he had insisted. "My wife will manage our home," he declared, his voice full of pride back then. "Her talent is here, making our life perfect." She had believed him. Foolishly, perhaps, she had believed him. The stress began to take its toll. Mark, usually impeccably groomed, started to look haggard. He developed a nervous twitch in his eye. His confident swagger was replaced by a tense, restless energy. He and Emily, once so enamored, began to bicker constantly. She accused him of lying about his financial stability, of dragging her into his problems. He accused her of being materialistic and unsupportive. Their glamorous new life was rapidly devolving into a bitter, resentful existence. "But this is our life. Mark," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "And the baby. It's our child. Our future." One afternoon, a letter arrived. It wasn't from a bank or a supplier. It was from a law firm. A very prestigious law firm. Mark opened it, his brow furrowed in confusion. The letter stated, in cold, precise legal terms, that his business practices were under review, and that several of his recent transactions were being investigated for potential fraud and misrepresentation. It also mentioned a formal petition for divorce and a claim for substantial assets, citing his abandonment and financial neglect. He leaned forward, a predatory glint in his eyes that she hadn't seen 5 years ago. "Not really. Your future, perhaps. Not mine." His words were precise, cutting through her fragile hope like a surgeon's scalpel. "Look at you. Sarah. A housewife. A burden. What do you contribute to this marriage? Truly, you don't work. You don't bring in money. You just exist. In my house. On my dime." Mark crumpled the letter in his hand, his face paling. Fraud, neglect. "What is this nonsense? Sarah can't do this. She has no money, no lawyers." He laughed, a hollow, desperate sound. "She's bluffing. She's trying to scare me." Tears pricked at her eyes, but she blinked them back fiercely. She wouldn't give him the satisfaction. "I manage everything. Mark, the household, your schedule, the bills, the social engagements. I make sure your life runs smoothly so you can focus on your business." But a chilling thought, a tiny, insidious seed of doubt, began to sprout in his mind. the mysterious financial restrictions, the sudden loss of clients, the investor pulling out. Could it be connected? Could Sarah, somehow, be behind this? The idea was preposterous, yet a cold dread began to settle in his stomach. He had underestimated her once, believing her to be weak and insignificant. He was about to learn just how catastrophically wrong he had been. The storm he had dismissed as a mere drizzle was now gathering into a furious tempest, and he was standing directly in its path, completely unprepared for the deluge. He laughed again, a harsh, grating sound, smoothly. "My business is thriving despite you, Sarah. Not because of you. In fact, you're a liability, a constant reminder of a mistake I made." He stood up, pacing the room, his expensive loafers silent on the polished marble floor. "I need a partner. Sarah. Someone who understands the world I live in. Someone who can contribute, not just consume." The letter, crumpled in Mark's hand, was a chilling harbinger of the storm he refused to acknowledge. He dismissed it as Sarah's desperate bluff, a pathetic attempt to reclaim what he believed was rightfully his. He couldn't fathom that the woman he had discarded, the useless housewife, could orchestrate such a sophisticated attack. Yet the unsettling glitches in his finances and the sudden collapse of his business deals continued, intensifying with an alarming regularity. Unbeknownst to him, Sarah, guided by Eleanor's shrewd counsel, had begun to pull the strings of a vast, unseen network, meticulously dismantling his world piece by piece. The word hung in the air, heavy and suffocating: consume. Was that all she was to him? A parasite. The baby kicked, a gentle reminder of the innocent life growing inside her, a life that was half him. Did he feel nothing for it? Sarah, now seated comfortably in a sleek, high-rise office building that was part of Vance Global Holdings, watched Mark's escalating panic from a distance. She had access to resources he couldn't even dream of: a team of forensic accountants, cybersecurity experts, and a global network of industry contacts. Eleanor had taught her that true power lay not in brute force, but in strategic, almost imperceptible pressure. It was like watching a spider weave an intricate web, each thread a subtle disruption, slowly trapping its unsuspecting prey. "What are you saying, Mark?" she asked, her voice barely audible. A cold dread was seeping into her bones, a premonition of something terrible. "Mr. Thompson's primary business partner, Sterling Corp., has a significant reliance on our subsidiary, Vance Logistics, for their international shipping," Ms. Davies, her lead lawyer, explained during a strategy meeting. "A slight delay in their shipments, a sudden reevaluation of our contractual terms, could make their operations untenable." He stopped, turning to face her, his expression devoid of any warmth. "I'm saying this isn't working. It hasn't been working for a long time. I've met someone. Sarah. Someone who understands me. Someone who is ambitious, driven, who can actually help me build my empire." Sarah nodded, her gaze firm. "Proceed with caution, but with purpose. We want to disrupt, not destroy their entire operation. The goal is to make Mark's association with them a liability, not an asset." Her breath hitched. The world tilted. Someone else. The words were foreign, impossible. "Mark, we're having a baby. We're a family." Within days, Sterling Corp. began experiencing unprecedented logistical nightmares. Shipments were delayed, customs clearances became inexplicably complicated, and their distribution network suddenly faced unforeseen bottlenecks. Their profits plummeted, and their clients grew restless. When Sterling Corp. approached Mark, demanding solutions, he could offer none, his face a mask of bewildered frustration. He blamed external factors, global supply chain issues, anything but the invisible hand that was systematically choking his business. "A family?" he sneered, a flicker of disgust crossing his face. "Don't be naive. This isn't a family. It's a cage, and I'm breaking free." He walked over to the grand fireplace, adorned with an antique clock, and leaned against the mantelpiece, his back to her. "I want a divorce, Sarah, and I want you out of my house, today." Meanwhile, Sarah's team was meticulously digging into Mark's financial dealings. They uncovered a web of questionable transactions, inflated invoices, and shell companies designed to hide funds and evade taxes. His booming business was built on a foundation of deceit, a house of cards waiting for a strong wind. The words struck her like physical blows. out today, with nowhere to go, no job, no savings of her own. She had trusted him implicitly, had put all her financial affairs in his hands, as he had always insisted. For our future, darling, he'd said with a loving smile. That smile now felt like a venomous snake. We found several instances of outright fraud. Mrs. Vance reported a sharp-eyed forensic accountant presenting a thick binder of evidence. He's been siphoning funds from his company accounts into personal ones, and even diverting client payments to cover his lavish lifestyle. It's a clear pattern of embezzlement. But where will I go? She stammered, her voice cracking. I have no money. Mark, no job. And I'm pregnant. A cold satisfaction settled in Sarah's chest. This wasn't just about getting her house back. It was about exposing the true character of the man who had so cruelly discarded her. He wasn't just a philanderer, he was a criminal. He finally turned, a cruel smirk playing on his lips. That's your problem, isn't it? You should have thought about that before you decided to be a useless housewife. I've been generous. Sarah, I've provided for you for 5 years. Now, it's time for you to stand on your own 2 feet. He gestured vaguely toward the door. My lawyers will be in touch. Don't worry, I'll provide a small, monthly allowance for the child, but nothing for you. You're on your own. Emily, meanwhile, was growing increasingly agitated. The credit card declines had become a daily occurrence. Her designer shopping sprees were a distant memory, replaced by frantic checks of her bank balance. Mark's temper, once carefully controlled, now flared at the slightest provocation. Their glamorous life was rapidly unraveling, replaced by constant arguments and mutual suspicion. Her vision blurred with unshed tears. This wasn't just a divorce, it was an eviction. A calculated act of cruelty designed to leave her utterly destitute. The man she had loved, the father of her unborn child, was discarding her like a broken toy. The house, once a symbol of their shared dreams, now felt like a gilded prison from which she was being brutally ejected. The pain was a physical ache, a gaping wound in her chest. Mark, why is my card declined again? Emily shrieked one evening, throwing her phone onto the sofa. You said your business was booming. We can't even afford our usual restaurant anymore. You're a monster, she whispered, the words barely escaping her lips. Mark slammed his fist on the table. It's not my fault, Emily. Someone is targeting me. I just don't know who. He looked around, his eyes wild, as if searching for an invisible enemy. He even hired a private investigator, a former police officer, to look into the sabotage, but the investigator found nothing concrete, only a complex web of seemingly unrelated business misfortunes. It was like trying to catch smoke. He shrugged, unaffected. Call me what you like. Just be out by evening. My new partner is moving in tomorrow. Sarah, however, knew exactly who. She had instructed her legal team to subtly alert regulatory bodies to Mark's questionable financial practices. Anonymous tips, carefully crafted to avoid direct links to Sarah, were submitted to tax authorities and financial oversight committees. The goal was not a swift, dramatic takedown, but a slow, suffocating squeeze. The raw brutality of his words, the casual mention of his replacement, sent a wave of nausea through her. She clutched her belly, feeling Lily's tiny movements, a silent plea for protection. How could she protect her baby when she couldn't even protect herself? The illusion of her perfect life shattered around her, leaving her exposed, vulnerable, and utterly alone. This wasn't just heartbreak. It was a complete annihilation of her world, leaving her with nothing but despair and the terrifying uncertainty of a future she couldn't even begin to imagine. Soon, Mark received official letters from various government agencies, requesting audits and demanding detailed financial records. His lawyers, who had initially dismissed Sarah's divorce petition as trivial, now looked at him with growing concern. The scope of the investigations was far beyond a simple marital dispute. The grand gilded doors of what had once been her home slammed shut behind her, echoing the finality of Mark's words. Sarah stood on the manicured lawn, the cool evening air biting at her exposed skin, a small worn duffel bag clutched in one hand, and her precious baby, Lily, bundled tightly against her chest in the other. The house, lit up like a beacon of prosperity, now felt like a cruel, mocking monument to her shattered dreams. She had nowhere to go, no money, no plan, just the terrifying, vast expanse of the city stretching out before her, indifferent and cold. Mr. Thompson, these are serious allegations. His lead lawyer stated gravely. The IRS, the SEC, they don't just open investigations without significant cause. Someone has provided them with very detailed information. Tears streamed down her face, blurring the streetlights into hazy halos. Lily, sensing her mother's distress, let out a soft whimper, a tiny sound that pierced through Sarah's despair and ignited a fierce, protective instinct. She couldn't break. Not now. Not with Lily depending on her. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, took a shaky breath, and began to walk. Each step was heavy, laden with the weight of betrayal and the crushing uncertainty of her future. Mark's face paled. But who's Sarah? She wouldn't know how he clung to the image of his timid, ignorant ex-wife, unable to reconcile it with the sophisticated attack he was facing. He was like a chess player who only saw his opponent's pawns, completely missing the queen poised for checkmate. The initial shock slowly gave way to a gnawing hunger and the biting chill of the night. She walked aimlessly at first, past familiar shops and restaurants that now seemed to mock her destitution. The bustling city, usually a source of comfort and anonymity, felt hostile, its bright lights highlighting her vulnerability. She tried to remember if she had any friends she could call, but her life had become so intertwined with Mark's, so isolated within the confines of their perfect home, that her old connections had withered. She was truly, utterly alone. Emily, witnessing his spiraling panic and the undeniable financial strain, began to distance herself. The lavish lifestyle she craved was gone, replaced by stress and uncertainty. She started making excuses to avoid him, spending more time with her own friends, subtly hinting that she deserved better than a man whose empire was crumbling. As the hours dragged on, the city grew quiet. The late-night revelers disappeared, and the streets became deserted. Save for the occasional passing car, Sarah found herself seeking refuge under the dim glow of a bus stop shelter, huddling with Lily to share what little warmth they had. The concrete bench was cold and unforgiving. Lily stirred, her tiny hand reaching out to grasp Sarah's finger, and Sarah pressed a kiss to her daughter's soft head, a silent promise to fight for them both. "This is all your fault," Sarah Mark muttered to himself one night, staring at the ceiling of his once grand bedroom, now feeling like a cage. He still clung to the delusion that she was acting alone, somehow, with limited resources. He couldn't comprehend the true power arrayed against him. He was losing clients, facing legal scrutiny, and his reputation was being quietly, systematically shredded within his industry. Deals that had seemed certain evaporated. Investors who had once eagerly courted him now avoided his calls. The harsh reality of homelessness quickly set in. The next morning, hunger gnawed at her stomach. She had a few dollars in her purse, barely enough for a cheap coffee and a stale pastry. Every public restroom became a sanctuary, a place to change Lily's diaper and splash cold water on her own tired face. She tried to make her appearance presentable, to avoid the suspicious glances that often fell upon those who looked like they lived on the streets. The shame was a heavy cloak, wrapping around her, threatening to suffocate her. The house, once a symbol of his triumph, now felt hollow. Emily's presence, once a source of pride, was now a constant reminder of his dwindling funds and mounting problems. He had built his life on a foundation of arrogance and deceit, believing himself untouchable. But Sarah, the woman he had underestimated, was proving to be the architect of his downfall, her unseen hand meticulously orchestrating his demise. He was trapped in a web of his own making, and the threads were tightening, pulling him closer to an inevitable public reckoning. She tried to think, to plan, but her mind felt like a tangled mess. Where could she find a job without a resume, without references, without even a stable address? Who would hire a heavily pregnant woman, or a new mother with an infant in tow? Every avenue seemed blocked, every door slammed shut. The despair was a physical weight, pressing down on her, making it hard to breathe. The air in the courtroom was thick with a tension so palpable, you could almost taste it. Sarah sat at the plaintiff's table, her back straight, her gaze unwavering. She wore a tailored suit, a subtle shade of charcoal, that spoke of quiet power rather than ostentation. Her hair, once often pulled back in a simple ponytail, was now styled in a sophisticated, elegant bob, framing a face that was no longer timid or heartbroken, but composed and resolute. By her side sat Miss Davies, a picture of calm professionalism, and a junior lawyer meticulously arranging documents. Days bled into nights. Sarah learned to navigate the city's hidden corners, the places where the homeless found temporary respite. She slept in parks, in abandoned doorways, always with one eye open. Lily clutched tightly to her. The kindness of strangers was rare but profoundly impactful. A warm meal from a soup kitchen, a kind word from a passerby. But mostly, there was indifference, or worse, outright contempt. She saw the judgment in people's eyes, the quick glances away, as if her presence was an uncomfortable reminder of the fragility of their own lives. Across the aisle, at the defendant's table, sat Mark. He looked a shadow of his former self. His expensive suit seemed to hang loosely on his frame, his face gaunt, his eyes bloodshot and darting nervously around the room. Beside him, Emily, her usual vibrant confidence replaced by a strained, anxious expression, clutched his arm, her designer handbag looking oddly out of place in the austere setting. Mark's family, a small, grim-faced contingent, sat in the rows behind him, their expressions a mix of confusion and thinly veiled anger. They had always adored Mark, seen him as the golden boy. One particularly cold night, huddled in a damp alleyway, Lily began to cry, a weak, hungry wail that tore at Sarah's heart. She had nothing left, no milk, no formula, no money. Desperation, raw and primal, clawed at her throat. She felt tears freezing on her cheeks, her body trembling not just from the cold, but from sheer terror. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about Lily. She had to find a way. The judge entered, and everyone rose. The proceedings began, a formal dance of legal arguments and evidence presentation. Sarah listened to Ms. Davies outline the petition for divorce, the request for full custody of Lily, and the comprehensive financial claims against Mark. The lawyer's voice was calm, methodical, laying out a devastating case of abandonment, financial neglect, and marital fraud. As Lily's cries grew weaker, a fragmented memory, buried deep beneath years of domesticity, surfaced, an old, faded photograph, a stern but kind face. Her mother, years ago, mentioning a distant relative, an eccentric great-aunt named Eleanor. Her parents had always dismissed Aunt Eleanor as odd or reclusive, someone best left alone. They rarely spoke of her, and Sarah had only met her once, briefly, as a child. But in this moment of utter desolation, Aunt Eleanor was the only name that came to mind, the only thread, however thin, connecting her to something beyond this immediate, terrifying reality. Mark's lawyer, a blustering man with an inflated sense of self-importance, rose to counter. He painted Sarah as a manipulative, gold-digging ex-wife, making baseless accusations to extort money. My client, Mr. Thompson, a pillar of this community, has been subjected to a malicious campaign of harassment and defamation by a woman who simply cannot accept the end of their marriage. He boomed, gesturing dramatically towards Sarah. She remembered a vague address, a small, unassuming house in a quiet, almost forgotten part of the city, far from the gleaming towers of Mark's world. It was a long shot, a desperate gamble, but it was all she had. With renewed, albeit fragile, determination, Sarah pulled Lily closer, whispered a prayer, and began to walk again, her feet aching, her body weary, but a tiny spark of hope flickering in her chest. The journey would be long, arduous, and uncertain, but it was a journey away from the cold, hard pavement and towards a whisper of a possibility. She had to try. For Lily, Sarah felt a flicker of the old fear, the old self-doubt, but it was quickly extinguished by a surge of cold fury. She met Mark's gaze across the room. He looked at her with a mixture of disbelief and contempt. Still seeing the weak woman he had thrown out, he smirked, a condescending gesture that promised her nothing but failure. "Mark, are you sure everything's okay with your company?" Emily asked one evening, her voice tinged with genuine concern. Her own credit cards were now consistently declined, forcing her to rely solely on the cash he reluctantly gave her. The lavish lifestyle was becoming a distant memory. Then came the moment for Sarah to take the stand. She walked to the witness box, her steps steady, her head held high. She swore to tell the truth, her voice clear and strong. Mark watched her, his smirk faltering slightly. This wasn't the whimpering Sarah he remembered. The address was etched into Sarah's memory, a faint beacon in the overwhelming darkness. It took her 2 days, walking, resting in parks, accepting the occasional kindness of strangers at soup kitchens, to reach the quiet, unassuming part of the city. The exhaustion was bone deep, her body aching, but the thought of Aunt Eleanor, however distant and eccentric, was the only thing propelling her forward. Lily, thankfully, had been mostly quiet, a testament to her resilient spirit, or perhaps just the deep sleep of infancy. Ms. Davies began her questioning, guiding Sarah through the painful narrative of her marriage, her devotion, her sacrifices, Mark's growing contempt, and the brutal day he kicked her out with nothing. Sarah recounted the nights on the street, the cold, the hunger, Lily's cries, her voice trembling slightly with emotion, but never breaking. The street was lined with modest, older houses, their gardens well tended, a stark contrast to the sprawling, modern mansions of Mark's world. The house she sought was at the very end of the street, partially obscured by an overgrown hedge. It was smaller than she remembered, with peeling paint on the porch and a slightly crooked mailbox. It looked ordinary. Too ordinary for the faint, elusive hope she was clinging to. And at that time, Mrs. Thompson, Ms. Davies asked, "Did you have any independent financial resources?" She hesitated at the gate, her hand trembling as she reached for the rusty latch. What if Aunt Eleanor wasn't home? What if she turned them away? What if she didn't even remember Sarah? The question swirled in her mind, threatening to drown the fragile spark of hope. But then Lily stirred, a soft sigh against her chest, and Sarah knew she had no choice. She pushed open the gate and walked up the short, cracked pathway. None, Sarah stated clearly. My husband managed all our finances. He insisted I focus on the home. I trusted him. A faint light glowed from a window. Sarah took a deep breath, marshaling what little courage she had left, and knocked. The sound echoed hollowly in the quiet evening. She waited, her heart pounding against her ribs, every second stretching into an eternity. Just as despair began to creep back in, the door creaked open. A collective gasp rippled through the courtroom from Mark's family. They had believed Sarah was well provided for. A woman stood in the doorway, framed by the dim light of the hallway. She was old, her face a roadmap of wrinkles, her silver hair pulled back in a severe bun. Her eyes, however, were sharp and intelligent, missing nothing. She wore a simple, dark dress, and her hands, though gnarled with age, seemed surprisingly strong as they rested on the doorframe. This was Aunt Eleanor. Then came the turning point. Miss Davies shifted her line of questioning. Mrs. Thompson, can you tell the court about your current financial standing? Yes, Eleanor's voice was surprisingly firm, with a hint of an old-world accent Sarah couldn't quite place. Her gaze swept over Sarah's disheveled appearance, the worn duffel bag, and finally settled on Lily, bundled in her arms. There was no immediate warmth, no recognition, just a cool, assessing stare. Mark's lawyer immediately objected, calling it irrelevant, but Ms. Davies countered, arguing it was crucial to establish Sarah's ability to provide for Lily and to counter the defense's portrayal of her as a desperate, manipulative woman. The judge allowed it. Aunt Eleanor Sarah's voice was hoarse from disuse and emotion. It's Sarah. Eleanor, your niece. My mother was Clara. Sarah took a deep breath, her eyes locking onto Mark's. He was watching her, a sneer beginning to form on his lips, expecting her to admit to some meager, struggling existence. Eleanor's eyes narrowed slightly, a flicker of something unreadable passing through them. Clara's daughter, she murmured, as if testing the words. She stepped back, opening the door wider. Come in. You look like you've been through a storm. I am the sole heir and principal of Vance Global Holdings, Sarah stated, her voice calm, clear, and utterly devoid of emotion. A global conglomerate with diversified interests in technology, finance, real estate, manufacturing, and logistics, with assets valued in the multi-billions. Relief, so potent it almost buckled her knees, washed over Sarah. She stepped inside, the warmth of the small house a welcome embrace after days in the cold. The interior was cluttered but cozy, filled with towering bookshelves, antique furniture, and the faint scent of old paper and herbs. It was nothing like Mark's minimalist, sterile mansion. The words hit the courtroom like a thunderclap. A stunned silence fell. So profound you could hear a pin drop. Mark's jaw literally dropped. Emily's eyes widened to saucers, and her grip on Mark's arm went slack. His family members exchanged bewildered, disbelieving glances. Eleanor led her to a worn armchair by a crackling fireplace. "Sit! You look faint." She then turned her attention to Lily. "And the child." Mark finally found his voice, a strangled, incredulous whisper. "What? That's impossible. She's lying." "This is Lily," Sarah said, her voice softer as she looked at her daughter. She's very young, Ms. Davies, however, was ready. "Objection. Your Honor. The witness is stating a fact." She then turned to the judge. "Your Honor, we have prepared a comprehensive dossier, including authenticated legal documents, trust deeds, and corporate filings, proving Mrs. Vance's undisputed lineage and ownership of Vance Global Holdings." Eleanor nodded, her gaze lingering on Lily for a moment longer than Sarah expected. A new life. Always a blessing. She then disappeared into another room, returning a moment later with a steaming mug. "Drink this. It's a calming tea. And I'll fetch some warm milk for the baby." She presented a thick binder, far more substantial than any document Mark's lawyer had produced. The judge, a seasoned veteran of countless trials, took the binder, his expression unreadable, and began to flip through the pages. As he read, his eyebrows slowly rose, a clear sign of his astonishment. Sarah gratefully took the mug, her numb fingers warming around the ceramic. The tea was fragrant and soothing, a small comfort that felt immense. As Eleanor busied herself, Sarah looked around the room, taking in the details. There were strange, intricate tapestries on the walls, and a collection of what looked like ancient maps and astronomical charts. It was an eclectic mix, hinting at a life far more complex than her parents had ever let on. Sarah watched Mark's face. The sneer had vanished, replaced by a ghastly pallor. His eyes, fixed on her, were filled with a dawning horror, a slow, agonizing realization of the monumental mistake he had made. The woman he had dismissed as worthless, the useless housewife he had kicked to the curb, was not just wealthy, she was unimaginably powerful. The irony was a bitter poison in his mouth. Eleanor returned with a bottle of warm milk, which Lily eagerly accepted, her tiny mouth latching on with surprising strength. As Lily drank, a peaceful quiet settled over the room, broken only by the crackling fire and Lily's soft suckling sounds. Eleanor sat in a chair opposite Sarah, observing her with that same intense, unreadable gaze. "Ms. Davies continued, her voice now carrying a quiet triumph. "Furthermore, Your Honor, in the course of preparing Mrs. Vance's claim, our forensic accounting team uncovered extensive evidence of fraudulent financial activities within Mr. Thompson's business, including embezzlement, tax evasion, and misrepresentation of assets. We have already submitted this evidence to the relevant regulatory bodies, who have initiated their own investigations. So," Eleanor said, her voice softer now, "Clara rarely spoke of me. And you, Sarah, you look like you've been cast out." It wasn't a question, but a statement of fact. Mark's lawyer, who had been about to object, suddenly slumped in his chair, his face ashen. The weight of the allegations, backed by the undeniable power of Vance Global Holdings, was crushing. Sarah felt a fresh wave of tears welling up, but this time, they were tears of exhaustion and a fragile sense of safety. "My husband, he kicked me out. For another woman, he left me with nothing." The words tumbled out, raw and painful. "I have nowhere to go. Aunt Eleanor, I don't know what to do." The courtroom buzzed with hushed whispers. Reporters, initially present for a mundane divorce case, were now frantically scribbling notes, their eyes wide with the magnitude of the revelation. This wasn't just a divorce. It was a bombshell, a public humiliation for Mark Thompson, and the dramatic unveiling of a hidden heiress. Eleanor listened, her expression unchanging, her eyes fixed on Sarah's face. When Sarah finished, the old woman simply nodded. "Men are often fools, driven by greed and fleeting desires. But that is their folly, not yours." She paused, then looked directly at Sarah. "You may stay here, for now, you and the child. This house has room. And it seems fate has brought you to my doorstep for a reason." Sarah looked at Mark one last time. His face was a mask of utter defeat, his arrogance shattered, replaced by a raw, naked fear. He had gambled everything, believing he held all the cards, only to discover that his ex-wife was holding the entire deck, and she was about to play her winning hand. The confrontation was over, and the truth, in all its shocking glory, had finally been laid bare. Sarah looked at her, bewildered. A reason. What reason could there be? She was just a desperate, homeless woman seeking refuge. But Eleanor's words, though cryptic, offered a lifeline, a temporary refuge, a chance to breathe. The relief that flooded her was immense, a physical lightness after days of crushing weight. She had found a port in the storm. However humble it seemed, for the first time in days, she felt a tiny, fragile hope begin to bloom in her shattered heart. This small, unassuming house, and the enigmatic woman within it, offered a sanctuary she desperately needed, a quiet space where she could begin to heal and perhaps to understand. The silence in the courtroom, after Sarah's calm declaration, was deafening, a vacuum created by the sheer force of an unimaginable truth. Mark's face, a mask of utter disbelief and dawning horror, was a sight Sarah knew she would never forget. Emily, beside him, had gone rigid, her eyes fixed on the thick binder of documents the judge was now meticulously examining. The hushed whispers from the public gallery grew into a low, excited murmur as the weight of the revelation began to sink in. The quiet warmth of Aunt Eleanor's home was a balm to Sarah's shattered soul. Days bled into weeks, and the initial shock of her homelessness slowly began to recede, replaced by a fragile sense of security. Eleanor, true to her word, provided a safe haven. She was a woman of few words, but her actions spoke volumes. She ensured Sarah and Lily had food, warmth, and a comfortable, if somewhat cluttered, room to sleep in. The judge, a man who had presided over countless cases of human folly and ambition, finally looked up from the documents, his expression now one of profound gravity. "Ms. Davies," he addressed Sarah's lawyer, his voice resonating through the stunned room. "The evidence presented here is substantial, and the allegations regarding Mr. Thompson's business practices are extremely serious." He then turned his gaze to Mark's lawyer, who sat slumped, defeated. "Does the defense have any immediate rebuttal to the plaintiff's claim of inheritance, or the evidence of financial misconduct?" As Sarah settled into the rhythm of the house, caring for Lily and helping with small chores, she began to notice things that subtly contradicted the modest facade. The old house, while outwardly unassuming, held an air of quiet luxury. The antique furniture, upon closer inspection, was not merely old but exquisitely crafted, its wood gleaming with a deep, rich patina. The intricate tapestries on the walls, which she had initially dismissed as quaint, revealed themselves to be ancient, hand-woven masterpieces, their colors still vibrant. Mark's lawyer stammered, "Your Honor, we were not aware of the extent of Mrs. Vance's connections. This information is entirely new to us. We request time to review these documents." His voice lacked its earlier bluster, replaced by a desperate plea. One afternoon, while dusting a bookshelf, Sarah's fingers brushed against a heavy, leather-bound volume. It wasn't a common book. Its pages were filled with what looked like complex financial ledgers, interspersed with old photographs of grand buildings and bustling factories. On one page, a faded inscription read, "Eleanor Vance, Vance Global Holdings." Sarah frowned. Vance Global Holdings. She'd never heard of it. It sounded like a massive corporation, not something connected to a quiet, reclusive aunt in a small house. "Ignorance is not a defense, counsel," the judge stated dryly, his eyes flicking to Mark, who was now visibly trembling. "The plaintiff's legal team has clearly done their due diligence. Given the nature of these revelations, particularly the allegations of fraud and the immediate impact on Mr. Thompson's business, I am prepared to issue an interim ruling." Another time, she saw Eleanor on an old rotary phone, speaking in a language Sarah didn't recognize, her voice low and firm. The conversation sounded intense, filled with terms like market fluctuations and asset management. When Eleanor hung up, she simply smiled faintly at Sarah's curious glance and said, "Just an old friend, discussing investments." But the look in her eyes suggested something far more significant. The words sent a fresh wave of shock through the courtroom. An interim ruling meant a swift, decisive blow. Mark looked like a deer caught in headlights, his eyes wide with panic. Eleanor, for her part, observed Sarah with an almost imperceptible intensity. She watched Sarah's gentle handling of Lily, her quiet resilience in the face of adversity, her unwavering kindness despite the betrayal she had endured. She saw the strength beneath the vulnerability, the intelligence behind the quiet demeanor. It was as if Eleanor was testing her, assessing her, waiting for the right moment. The judge continued, his voice firm and clear. Based on the compelling evidence presented, the court grants interim full custody of the minor child, Lily Thompson, to Mrs. Sarah Vance, effective immediately. Furthermore, all assets currently held by Mr. Mark Thompson, both personal and business, are hereby frozen, pending a full investigation into the allegations of fraud and embezzlement. A substantial portion of these frozen assets will be immediately allocated to an emergency trust for the care and well-being of Lily Thompson, and to provide Mrs. Ann Vance with immediate financial stability. One evening, as Lily slept soundly in a makeshift crib, Sarah and Eleanor sat by the crackling fire, sipping tea. The silence was comfortable now, no longer strained. Sarah felt a strange urge to ask about the book, about the phone calls, about the subtle discrepancies she'd noticed. A collective gasp swept through the room. Frozen assets, emergency trust. This was far more than a simple divorce settlement. This was a complete financial annihilation. Mark let out a strangled sound, half gasp, half sob. Emily, her face ashen, finally released his arm, recoiling as if he were suddenly contagious. Aunt Eleanor, Sarah began, hesitant. I saw a book the other day. It mentioned Vance Global Holdings. What is that? The judge wasn't finished. Given the severity of the alleged financial crimes, this court will also formally recommend to the relevant federal and state authorities that criminal investigations into Mr. Thompson's business practices be expedited. This court will reconvene in 3 weeks for a final hearing, at which time Mr. Thompson will be expected to provide a full accounting of his finances and address these grave accusations. Eleanor's eyes, usually so guarded, softened almost imperceptibly. She took a slow sip of her tea, her gaze fixed on the dancing flames. It is a part of our family's legacy. Sarah, a very large part. With a final, sharp bang of his gavel, the judge concluded the session. Court adjourned. Sarah waited, her heart beginning to pound with a strange anticipation. The moment the gavel fell, the courtroom erupted. Reporters, who had been holding their breath, surged forward, their cameras flashing, their microphones thrust towards Sarah and Ms. Davies. Mrs. Vance, can you confirm your identity as the Vance Global Holdings heir? What are the full implications of this ruling? Mr. Thompson, do you have a comment on the fraud allegations? Eleanor finally turned to her, her expression serious. Your parents, Clara and Robert, they kept many secrets from you, not out of malice, but out of a misguided attempt at protection. They wanted you to have a normal life, free from the burdens and dangers that come with immense wealth and power. Mark, utterly shattered, sat motionless for a moment, his head in his hands. Emily, seeing the cameras and the public humiliation, abruptly stood up. This is insane. Mark, I can't believe you lied to me about everything, she hissed, her voice loud enough to be heard by those nearby. Without another word, she grabbed her handbag and pushed past his bewildered family, fleeing the courtroom, leaving Mark utterly alone at the defendant's table. Dangers, Sarah whispered, bewildered. His family, initially stunned, now looked at him with a mixture of horror and betrayal. His mother, who had always doted on him, covered her mouth with a trembling hand, her eyes filled with tears. His father, usually stern, looked utterly defeated. They had believed in his success, his image, completely unaware of the rotten foundation upon which it was built. Indeed, Eleanor said, her voice dropping to a low, grave tone. Our family, the Vance family, is not merely wealthy. We are a dynasty. For generations, we have built an empire. Vance Global Holdings is the umbrella under which countless companies operate. In technology, finance, real estate, manufacturing, shipping, it is a multi-billion-dollar enterprise, with interests across every continent. Sarah stared, her mind struggling to process the words. A multi-billion-dollar enterprise. Her family. It sounded like something out of a fantastical novel, not her own life. But my parents were just ordinary. My father was a professor, my mother a librarian. Eleanor nodded. And they were good, honest people. But they chose to live a quiet life, away from the glare of the family's true influence. They believed that the less you knew, the safer you would be. There are forces in the world that seek to exploit or undermine such power. They wanted to shield you from that. The news spread like wildfire. Within hours, local news channels were running breaking stories, hidden heiress unveiled in shocking divorce trial. Billion-dollar empire claims disgraced businessman's assets. Fraud allegations rock Thompson Enterprises. The story was a sensation. A perfect storm of wealth, betrayal, and dramatic justice. Social media exploded with the news. Mark's carefully cultivated image of success crumbling under the weight of public scrutiny. His business associates, who had quietly distanced themselves in recent weeks, now openly condemned him, eager to sever all ties. His clients, whose payments he had embezzled, were now pursuing their own legal actions. "Shield me." Sarah's voice was incredulous. "They left me with nothing. They let me marry a man who despised me, who threw me out onto the street with our baby. How was that protection?" The shockwave extended beyond the courtroom, rippling through every aspect of Mark's life. His carefully constructed network of contacts evaporated. His reputation was utterly destroyed. The lavish house, now frozen, became a symbol of his downfall, a gilded cage he could no longer afford. Emily, true to her materialistic nature, had vanished completely, leaving him to face the fallout alone. A flicker of genuine pain crossed Eleanor's face. That was their greatest miscalculation. Sarah. They never anticipated such cruelty. They believed Mark was a good man, ambitious but honorable. They were wrong, and for that, I am truly sorry. I watched from afar, as I was instructed to do, but I never intervened, believing their judgment was sound. It was a mistake I deeply regret. Sarah, watching the news from Eleanor's quiet living room, felt a complex mix of emotions. There was no triumphant glee, only a quiet satisfaction that justice was finally being served. Lily, nestled in her arms, gurgled happily, completely unaware of the storm her mother had just weathered, or the empire that now awaited her. The truth had been laid bare, shocking the world and leaving Mark Thompson utterly exposed. A fool who had discarded a diamond. Unaware it was the key to a kingdom, Eleanor then leaned forward, her eyes piercing Sarah's. "But now, the truth must be known. You are not just Clara's daughter, Sarah. You are the direct, sole heir to the Vance fortune. The last living descendant of the main line. All of it. Everything the Vance family has built over centuries belongs to you, and by extension, to Lily." The 3 weeks leading up to the final court hearing felt like an eternity, yet also passed in a blur. For Mark, they were a descent into a living nightmare. His frozen assets meant he couldn't access his own money. His business was collapsing under the weight of investigations, and his once loyal associates had abandoned him. Emily was long gone, having found a new, more financially stable partner. He was truly alone, facing the full, terrifying consequences of his greed and cruelty. The words hung in the air, heavy with the weight of destiny. Sarah felt a dizzying rush of emotions, shock, disbelief, a strange sense of unreality. She, the discarded housewife, the woman who had just spent days homeless, was the heir to a billion-dollar company. It was too much to comprehend. For Sarah, these weeks were a period of quiet consolidation. With the interim ruling, she had immediate financial stability for Lily and herself. She moved into a spacious, elegant apartment provided by Vance Global Holdings, a stark contrast to the small, cluttered house she had shared with Eleanor, or the cold streets she had endured. Lily thrived in the new environment, her laughter filling the rooms, a constant reminder of Sarah's purpose. Eleanor, ever present, continued to guide her, preparing her not just for the legal battle, but for the immense responsibilities that lay ahead. "Me," she stammered, "but I don't know anything about business. I'm just a housewife." The final hearing was less a trial and more a formality. Mark's lawyer, now fully aware of the insurmountable evidence against his client and the formidable power of Vance Global Holdings, advised Mark to accept a plea bargain for the criminal charges and to settle the civil case. Mark, stripped of his arrogance and facing potential prison time, had no choice but to comply. Eleanor smiled, a rare, genuine smile that softened her stern features. You are far more than just a housewife. Sarah, I have watched you. You are resilient. You are kind. You are intelligent. And you have a strength within you that Mark, in his foolishness, could never see. These are the true qualities of a leader. The business can be learned. The character cannot. Sarah entered the courtroom on the final day, not with a sense of triumph, but with quiet dignity. She wore a simple, elegant dress, her posture confident. Mark was already there, looking utterly defeated, his face pale and drawn. His family was absent, unable to bear the public humiliation any longer. She rose and walked over to a large, antique chest in the corner of the room. With a key from around her neck, she unlocked it, revealing stacks of meticulously organized documents, old photographs, and what looked like legal papers. The judge, his expression still grave, swiftly outlined the terms of the settlement and the criminal charges. Mark Thompson pleaded guilty to several counts of financial fraud and embezzlement. The terms were harsh, but just. He would face a significant prison sentence, the exact duration to be determined by a separate criminal court. But it was clear his freedom would be severely curtailed for years. Your parents entrusted me with this, Eleanor said, gesturing to the contents. The proof of your lineage, the deeds, the trusts, the details of the empire that is now yours. They also gave me instructions to reveal this to you only when you were truly ready, or when circumstances made it absolutely necessary. It seems the latter has come to pass. For the civil case, the judge ruled decisively in Sarah's favor. She was granted full, sole legal and physical custody of Lily Thompson. Mark would have no visitation rights, a decision made based on his abandonment and the court's assessment of his character. This was a profound victory for Sarah, ensuring Lily's safety and future were entirely in her hands. Free from Mark's toxic influence, Eleanor picked up a faded photograph, showing a stern-looking man and woman from a bygone era. This is your great-grandfather, Arthur Vance, who built much of what we see today. And this, she pointed to a younger version of herself standing beside him, is me, his sister. I have been a silent guardian of this legacy, waiting for the right moment to guide you. Furthermore, the court ordered a substantial financial settlement from Mark's remaining assets, though much of it had already been frozen or seized by the ongoing criminal investigations. While the amount wasn't explicitly stated in court, it was clear it would be more than enough to ensure Sarah and Lily's financial security for life, even without the Vance inheritance. This was symbolic, a clear statement that Mark would pay for his actions. Sarah looked at the documents, at the photographs, at the woman who had just revealed a truth that shattered her entire understanding of her life. The humble house, the eccentric aunt. It was all a carefully constructed facade, a protective shell around a secret of unimaginable magnitude. She was not just a survivor, she was an heiress, a hidden queen, unknowingly carrying the weight of a vast empire on her shoulders. The revelation was overwhelming, terrifying, and exhilarating all at once. Her journey had just begun, and the path ahead was far grander and more perilous than she could ever have imagined. Most importantly, the court formally recognized Sarah Vance as the undisputed sole heir to the Vance Global Holdings empire. This legal declaration solidified her position, making her control over the multi-billion-dollar conglomerate absolute and undeniable. The judge's words were clear. Mrs. Sarah Vance is hereby recognized as the principal and legal owner of all assets and entities under the Vance Global Holdings umbrella. The revelation hung in the air, a shimmering, impossible truth that defied everything Sarah had ever known about herself. She stared at the documents, at the faded photographs of ancestors she'd never known, and then back at Aunt Eleanor, whose eyes held a depth of knowledge and a quiet power Sarah was only just beginning to perceive. The discarded housewife, the woman who had begged for shelter, was the heir to a multi-billion-dollar empire. The sheer scale of it was dizzying, overwhelming her senses. Mark sat motionless as the judge delivered the verdict, his head bowed, his shoulders slumped in utter defeat. He had lost everything: his freedom, his reputation, his wealth, and his child. The man who had once sneered at Sarah, who had thrown her and their baby out with such callous disregard, was now a broken shell, facing a future of incarceration and public disgrace. The justice was swift, comprehensive, and undeniable. $1 billion company, Sarah finally managed to whisper, the words feeling foreign on her tongue. But how, my parents? As the judge concluded, Sarah felt a profound sense of closure. It wasn't about revenge. It was about the restoration of balance, the triumph of right over wrong. She had endured unimaginable pain, but she had emerged stronger, more resilient, and with a clear path forward. Eleanor nodded, understanding her disbelief. Your parent, Clara and Robert, chose a life of quiet academia. They were brilliant, but they had seen the darker side of immense wealth, the jealousies, the threats, the constant pressure. They decided, after much deliberation, to shield you from it. They created a trust, a complex web of legal protections, to ensure that the Vance legacy would pass to you, their only child, but only when the time was right, or when circumstances made it absolutely necessary. They believed their quiet life would keep you safe, away from the prying eyes and dangers that often accompany such a fortune. Leaving the courtroom, Sarah was met by Miss Davies and Eleanor, both offering quiet, supportive smiles. The media frenzy was still intense, but Sarah now moved through it with an unshakable calm. She didn't offer any statements, letting the court's ruling speak for itself. A bitter laugh escaped Sarah's lips. Safe. They left me utterly vulnerable. Aunt Eleanor. They left me to marry a man who saw me as nothing but a burden, who threw me out like trash. How is that protection? The pain of her past, combined with the shock of this new reality, was a volatile mix. Later that day, back in her new apartment, Sarah held Lily close. Lily, giggling and reaching for her mother's hair, was the embodiment of her victory. Sarah looked at her daughter, her heart overflowing with love and a fierce sense of protection. The journey had been harrowing, but it had led them here, to a place of safety, security, and immense potential. Eleanor's expression softened, a rare display of emotion. You are right, Sarah. Their judgment, in that regard, was tragically flawed. They believed Mark was a good man, ambitious but with a good heart. They saw only his charm, not the greed that festered beneath. I watched, as I was instructed, from a distance. It was a mistake I deeply regret, not intervening when I saw the signs of his true character emerging. But now, that mistake can be rectified. The Vance family has resources that can undo the wrongs committed against you. The legal battle was over. Justice had been served. Mark Thompson, the fool who had discarded a diamond, unaware it was the key to a kingdom, was now facing the grim reality of his choices. Sarah Vance, the useless housewife, was no more. In her place stood a powerful, compassionate woman, ready to embrace her destiny and build a new, extraordinary legacy for herself and her daughter. The path ahead was clear, and it was entirely hers to forge. Sarah looked down at Lily, sleeping peacefully in her arms, oblivious to the seismic shift occurring in her mother's life. This wasn't just about Sarah anymore. It was about Lily's future, about securing a life for her daughter that was safe, stable, and filled with opportunity. The thought ignited a fierce resolve within her. With the legal battles behind her, a profound sense of calm settled over Sarah. The weight of the past, the betrayal, and the struggle for survival slowly lifted, replaced by the immense, exhilarating weight of her future. The apartment provided by Vance Global Holdings was no longer just a temporary refuge. It was her home, a spacious sanctuary where Lily's laughter echoed freely. Eleanor, always a quiet presence, observed Sarah's transformation with a knowing smile, her work as a guardian transitioning into that of a trusted advisor. But I don't know anything about this world, Sarah confessed, her voice laced with trepidation. I've spent years managing a home, not a global corporation. I don't even know where to begin. The true work, however, was just beginning. Sarah was now the undisputed principal of Vance Global Holdings, a multi-billion-dollar empire that spanned continents and industries. It was a daunting responsibility, but also an incredible opportunity. She had seen firsthand the destructive power of greed and dishonesty in Mark, and she was determined to lead Vance Global Holdings with a different philosophy, one rooted in integrity, ethical practices, and a genuine commitment to its people and the wider world. Eleanor's smile was knowing. The business out Sarah is merely a collection of systems and strategies. It can be learned. What cannot be learned is the character, the integrity, the resilience you have shown. Those are the true qualities of a leader, and you possess them in abundance. I have watched you. You are kind, yes, but you are also fiercely protective, intelligent, and adaptable. These are the traits that built the Vance empire, and these are the traits that will allow you to lead it. Her first few weeks were a whirlwind of meetings. She met with the executive board, a collection of seasoned professionals who had managed the company under Eleanor's discreet guidance for years. They were initially cautious, assessing this new, unexpected leader. Sarah, however, quickly earned their respect. She listened intently, asked sharp, insightful questions, and demonstrated a remarkable grasp of the complex issues at hand, a testament to Eleanor's rigorous training. She wasn't there to simply inherit, she was there to lead. Over the next few weeks, Aunt Eleanor began Sarah's education. The quiet, cluttered house transformed into a classroom. Eleanor, it turned out, was not just a guardian of the legacy, but a formidable businesswoman in her own right. Having served on the board of Vance Global Holdings for decades, her reclusive lifestyle a deliberate choice to maintain a low profile. Our legacy isn't just about profit, Sarah stated in her first official address to the board, her voice clear and firm. It's about how we achieve that profit. It's about our impact on our employees, our communities, and the environment. I want Vance Global Holdings to be a beacon of ethical business, a company that thrives not just financially, but morally. She started with the basics, explaining the intricate structure of Vance Global Holdings. Sarah learned about its diverse portfolio, the cutting-edge tech startups in Silicon Valley, the sprawling real estate developments in major cities, the vast shipping fleets that traversed oceans, the manufacturing plants producing everything from consumer goods to industrial machinery, and the powerful financial institutions that managed it all. It was a dizzying array of interconnected enterprises, a true global behemoth. This was a bold statement in the cutthroat world of global corporations, but Sarah was unwavering. She initiated a comprehensive review of all company practices, from supply chain ethics to employee welfare. She pushed for greater transparency, investing in sustainable manufacturing processes and demanding fair labor practices from all partners. There was initial resistance from some who were comfortable with the old ways, but Sarah, with Eleanor's quiet backing, was resolute. Eleanor introduced her to complex financial concepts, explaining balance sheets, market capitalization, mergers, and acquisitions. She taught Sarah about corporate governance, legal frameworks, and the subtle art of negotiation. She spoke of market trends, geopolitical influences, and the ruthless competition that existed at the pinnacle of global commerce. Sarah devoured the information, her mind, once focused on household budgets, now expanding to encompass billions. She focused on fostering a culture of trust and collaboration within the company. She held town hall meetings with employees, listening to their concerns and ideas. She implemented new programs for professional development, mental health support, and family leave. She believed that a company was only as strong as its people, and she invested heavily in their well-being. This approach, while initially seen as idealistic by some, quickly began to yield positive results, boosting morale and productivity. The world of high finance is a battlefield. Sarah, Eleanor explained one evening, poring over a detailed market report, it is filled with sharks and predators, always looking for weakness, always seeking to exploit. You must be shrewd, decisive, and unwavering, but you must also be ethical. The Vance legacy is built on integrity, even as it operates in a cutthroat environment. The media, still buzzing from the dramatic court case, watched Sarah's every move. They expected a ruthless heiress, a woman seeking revenge. Instead, they found a leader focused on quiet reform and genuine impact. News articles began to shift their tone, praising her progressive vision and her commitment to corporate social responsibility. Vance Global Holdings, once a powerful but somewhat anonymous entity, began to gain a new reputation as a forward-thinking, ethical leader in the global marketplace. She also delved into the history of the Vance family, revealing a lineage of visionary entrepreneurs, but also of fierce protectors of their privacy. Sarah learned about her great-grandfather, Arthur Vance, a titan of industry who built much of the modern empire, and his unwavering belief in legacy and family. Eleanor shared stories of past challenges, of rivals attempting hostile takeovers, of economic downturns weathered through strategic foresight, Sarah began to understand the weight of the name she now carried, the immense responsibility that came with it. Sarah also used her influence to subtly disrupt Mark's remaining business connections. While his assets were frozen and his criminal case was ongoing, there were still lingering ties. She ensured that any company with a history of unethical practices, or those still loosely affiliated with Mark, were systematically reviewed and, if necessary, disassociated from Vance Global Holdings. It was a quiet cleansing, a final severing of any connection to the past that had caused her so much pain. The training was intense, often exhausting. Sarah spent hours reading legal documents, analyzing financial reports, and discussing complex business strategies with Eleanor. Lily, often sleeping peacefully nearby, was a constant source of motivation. Every new piece of knowledge Sarah absorbed, every complex concept she grasped, was another brick in the foundation of her daughter's future. Under Sarah's leadership, Vance Global Holdings didn't just recover, it thrived. Her visionary strategies, combined with her ethical approach, attracted new talent and new, like-minded partners. The company's stock soared, its market share expanded, and its reputation for integrity became a competitive advantage. She proved that success didn't require ruthlessness. It demanded intelligence, vision, and a strong moral compass. Eleanor also taught Sarah about the importance of discretion and security. The power you now wield, Sarah, is immense. It attracts attention, both positive and negative. Your parents understood this, which is why they chose to keep you hidden. Now, as you step into the light, you must be prepared. Your every move will be scrutinized. There will be those who seek to exploit you, to undermine you, to take what is yours. She learned to balance the immense demands of leading a global empire with her most important role being a mother to Lily. Her days were long, filled with strategic decisions and international calls, but her evenings were dedicated entirely to her daughter. She read Lily stories, played games, and ensured that her childhood was filled with love, stability, and joy, everything that Mark had tried to deny them. Sarah felt a surge of cold anger whenever she thought of Mark. He had seen her as worthless, a drain on his meager resources. He had thrown her out, believing she had nothing. How utterly foolish he was. The irony was almost poetic. The woman he had scorned, the useless housewife, was about to become a force he couldn't possibly comprehend, let alone control. Eleanor, seeing Sarah flourish, began to step back, her role transitioning from mentor to cherished family. She watched with quiet pride as Sarah navigated the complexities of her new life, not just managing a company, but transforming it. Sarah was building a new legacy, one that honored the Vance name but was distinctly her own, forged in the fires of adversity and powered by an unwavering commitment to justice and kindness. The useless housewife had not only reclaimed her life, she was reshaping an empire, proving that true power lay not in wealth alone, but in the strength of one's character and the integrity of one's actions. As weeks turned into a month, Sarah's confidence grew. She was no longer the timid woman who had arrived on Eleanor's doorstep. Her posture straightened, her gaze became more direct, and her voice, though still soft, carried a newfound authority. She was still Sarah, the loving mother, but she was also Sarah Vance, the heir. The transformation was subtle but profound, a quiet blossoming of strength that had always been dormant within her, waiting for the right catalyst. Lily, now a toddler, was the sun around which Sarah's new world revolved. Every morning, Sarah would wake early, before the first rays of dawn touched the city skyline, to spend precious moments with her daughter. She would read to Lily from colorful picture books, her voice soft and soothing, or watch as Lily took her first wobbly steps, her tiny hands reaching out for balance. These moments of pure, unadulterated joy were the anchors in Sarah's demanding life, grounding her amidst the whirlwind of corporate responsibilities. Eleanor watched her progress with a quiet satisfaction. "You are ready, Sarah," she said one morning, closing a thick financial binder. "The time has come to reclaim what is rightfully yours, and to ensure that those who wronged you face the consequences of their actions." She made it a point to be present for all of Lily's milestones. No matter how busy her schedule, board meetings were strategically planned around Lily's nap times, and international calls were taken from her home office. Allowing her to peek in on her sleeping daughter, she hired a trusted nanny, a kind and experienced woman named Clara, a poignant echo of her mother's name, who understood Sarah's commitment to both her career and her child, but the primary care, the tender moments, the bedtime stories, those were exclusively Sarah's. Sarah, however, remained calm. Ms. Davies expertly shielded her from the immediate onslaught of reporters, guiding her towards a private exit. As she passed Mark's table, she paused for a fleeting moment. He finally lifted his head, his eyes meeting hers. There was no arrogance now, no sneer, only raw, naked fear and a profound, sickening realization of the colossal mistake he had made. The useless housewife he had scorned was not only the heir to a multi-billion-dollar empire, but she had systematically, legally, and publicly dismantled his entire life. The irony was a bitter, unbearable truth that would haunt him for years to come. Sarah was determined that Lily would grow up knowing her true heritage, not just of immense wealth, but of resilience, integrity, and the strength of a woman who had overcome unimaginable adversity. She spoke to Lily, even at her young age, about the importance of kindness, honesty, and standing up for what is right. She wanted Lily to understand that their fortune was a tool for good, a means to make a positive impact on the world, not just a symbol of luxury. Sarah looked at her aunt, a fierce determination hardening her gaze. The fear was still there, a faint echo, but it was now overshadowed by a powerful sense of purpose. She had been broken, discarded, and left for dead, but now she was armed with knowledge, power, and a lineage that stretched back centuries. Mark had no idea what was coming, and she was ready to show him the true cost of his betrayal. Her journey of reclamation was about to begin, and it would be a reckoning he would never forget. She also made sure Lily had a stable, loving environment, free from the chaos and emotional neglect Sarah had experienced in her marriage to Mark. Their apartment was filled with warmth, laughter, and the simple joys of childhood. Lily had a room filled with toys, a garden to play in, and the constant, unwavering love of her mother and Aunt Eleanor. Armed with newfound knowledge and a fierce resolve, Sarah stood on the precipice of a battle far more intricate than any she had imagined. It wasn't a physical confrontation, but a strategic war waged in boardrooms and courtrooms, a meticulous dismantling of the life Mark had so carelessly built on her shattered dreams. Aunt Eleanor, her silent guardian turned formidable mentor, was ready to guide her through the labyrinthine process of reclaiming her inheritance and, more importantly, her dignity. Eleanor, now a beloved great-aunt, often spent her afternoons with Lily, sharing stories of the Vance family history, subtly instilling in the child a sense of pride in her lineage. She taught Lily simple games that honed her cognitive skills, always with an underlying lesson about strategy or problem-solving. Eleanor saw in Lily the future of the Vance legacy, and she nurtured the child with a quiet devotion. The first step, Eleanor explained one morning, her voice crisp as she laid out a stack of legal documents on the polished mahogany table, is to formally assert your claim. This involves a series of legal filings, trusts, and declarations that will establish your identity as the sole heir to the Vance fortune. It's a complex process, designed to protect the legacy, but also to ensure that only the rightful heir can access it. Sarah's ability to balance her role as a visionary CEO with her profound commitment to motherhood became a source of inspiration, not just within Vance Global Holdings, but in the wider business community. She proved that a woman could be fiercely ambitious and successful in the corporate world, while also being a dedicated, loving parent. She shattered the old stereotypes, showing that strength and nurturing were not mutually exclusive, but complementary qualities. Sarah felt a tremor of apprehension. The legal jargon, the sheer volume of paperwork, the weight of the billions it represented, it was daunting. But then she looked at Lily, gurgling happily on a playmat nearby, and her resolve hardened. This wasn't just about money. It was about justice. It was about securing a future for her daughter that no man could ever take away. There were moments, of course, when the demands of her work threatened to overwhelm her. Long nights spent reviewing contracts, early morning calls with international partners, and complex negotiations that stretched for hours. But whenever she felt the pressure mounting, she would steal a moment to look at a photo of Lily, her bright, innocent smile a powerful reminder of why she was doing all of this. Lily was her anchor, her motivation, the living embodiment of her triumph. Eleanor introduced Sarah to a team of lawyers, a formidable collection of sharp minds who specialized in corporate law, international finance, and complex inheritance cases. They were discreet, efficient, and utterly loyal to Eleanor, and by extension, to the Vance legacy. Sarah found herself in meetings where terms like asset tracing, fiduciary duty, and hostile takeover defense were thrown around with casual ease. She listened intently, asking questions, absorbing every detail. Her mind, once confined to household budgets, was now rapidly expanding to grasp the intricacies of global finance. Her relationship with Lily was a stark contrast to Mark's cold detachment. He had seen Lily as a burden, an inconvenience. Sarah saw her as her greatest blessing, the most precious part of her life. She ensured that Lily would never know the pain of abandonment or the sting of a parent's disdain. Their bond was unbreakable, forged in the fires of Sarah's past struggles and strengthened by her unwavering love. The initial legal steps involved meticulously gathering and verifying documents, birth certificates, old family records, and the original trust deeds that had carefully concealed Sarah's true identity for decades. Eleanor had kept everything, a meticulous archive of a life Sarah never knew she was meant to live. These documents, once mere pieces of paper, now represented the keys to her future, the undeniable proof of her lineage. As Lily grew, Sarah made sure she was exposed to a diverse range of experiences, not just the privileged world of wealth. They visited museums, volunteered at local charities, and traveled to different countries, allowing Lily to see the world beyond their immediate sphere. Sarah wanted Lily to be compassionate, curious, and grounded, despite her extraordinary circumstances. Discretion is paramount. Eleanor stressed during one meeting with the lead lawyer, a stern but brilliant woman named Ms. Davies. Until the legal framework is fully in place, Sarah's identity must remain absolutely confidential. We do not want to alert Mark to the true extent of our resources until we are ready to strike. The useless housewife had not only reclaimed her life and her legacy, she had become a powerful, inspiring mother, raising a daughter who would embody the very best of the Vance name. Her triumph was not just in the billions she now commanded, but in the boundless love and unwavering dedication she poured into building a bright, secure, and meaningful future for Lily. Sarah understood. The element of surprise was their most potent weapon. Mark, in his arrogance, believed he had utterly destroyed her, leaving her powerless. The thought of his eventual realization, the dawning horror on his face, fueled a quiet, burning satisfaction within her. It wasn't about revenge, not entirely, but about a profound need for accountability. The dust of the courtroom had settled. The echoes of Mark's downfall faded into the grim annals of his past. Sarah, no longer defined by betrayal or the specter of homelessness, was now fully immersed in her new reality. The initial whirlwind of corporate meetings and legal finalizations gave way to a more settled, yet equally dynamic, existence. She was a CEO, a mother, and for the first time in a long time, truly herself. As she navigated this powerful new life, she discovered that true wealth wasn't just in the billions she commanded, but in the genuine connections she forged, the unexpected allies who saw beyond her fortune, and the profound sense of fulfillment that blossomed from within. The legal team began the intricate process of transferring assets, consolidating trusts, and establishing Sarah's legal control over Vance Global Holdings. This wasn't a simple bank transfer. It involved navigating international laws, corporate structures, and a vast network of investments across various industries. Sarah learned about the sheer scale of the Vance empire, the tech patents held, the real estate portfolios spanning continents, the shipping lanes controlled, the manufacturing plants churning out products globally. It was a dizzying education, but she embraced it with fierce determination. Her days were a demanding ballet of boardrooms and bedtime stories. She would rise before dawn, sometimes reviewing complex market analyses, other times simply watching Lily sleep, her heart swelling with a quiet gratitude. The balance was challenging, but Sarah, with her innate resilience and Eleanor's unwavering support, found her rhythm. She proved to her executives, and to herself, that compassion and shrewd business acumen were not mutually exclusive. Under her leadership, Vance Global Holdings wasn't just a financial powerhouse, it was becoming a beacon of ethical innovation, attracting talent and partnerships that aligned with her values. She also began to participate in strategic discussions about the company's current operations. Eleanor, who had been a silent but influential presence on the board for years, started bringing Sarah into high-level briefings. Sarah listened as executives discussed market trends, competitor strategies, and potential acquisitions. She realized that leading Vance Global Holdings wasn't just about managing money, it was about vision, leadership, and making decisions that affected thousands of lives. One such unexpected ally emerged from the corporate world itself. David Chen, the CEO of a leading sustainable technology firm, initially approached Vance Global Holdings for a potential acquisition. Sarah, however, saw more than just a business opportunity. She saw a shared vision. David was a quiet, brilliant man, driven by a passion for environmental responsibility and technological advancement. Their first few meetings were purely professional, dissecting market projections and synergy models. But as they spent more time together, discussing not just business, but their philosophies on leadership, their hopes for a better future, and even their shared love for classical music, a genuine connection began to form. Her transformation was subtle but undeniable. The timid, heartbroken woman who had arrived on Eleanor's doorstep was slowly being replaced by a confident, poised individual. Her posture straightened, her gaze became more direct, and her voice, though still soft, carried a newfound authority. She dressed differently now, in elegant, understated clothing that Eleanor had quietly arranged, clothes that fit her new role without being ostentatious. She looked like someone who belonged in the world of power, not someone who had been cast out of it. David was unlike Mark in every conceivable way. He was humble, insightful, and genuinely curious about Sarah's ideas. He saw her intellect, her integrity, and her quiet strength, never once mentioning her past or the dramatic circumstances of her inheritance. He valued her for who she was, not what she had. He became a trusted professional partner, offering invaluable advice and support as Sarah steered Vance Global Holdings through ambitious new ventures. Their collaboration led to groundbreaking initiatives in renewable energy and ethical manufacturing, solidifying Vance Global Holdings' reputation as an industry leader. Meanwhile, Mark and his new girlfriend, Emily, were blissfully unaware of the storm brewing on the horizon. They were still basking in their perceived victory, enjoying the house, and spending the money Mark had saved by cutting Sarah off. He believed he had gotten away clean, that Sarah was a broken, insignificant relic of his past. This delusion was exactly what Sarah and Eleanor needed. Beyond the corporate sphere, Sarah also found new, authentic friendships. She joined a local women's leadership group, initially out of professional obligation, but quickly found herself drawn to the diverse, accomplished women within it. These were women who had built their own empires, overcome their own challenges, and understood the unique pressures of balancing power with personal life. They shared stories, offered advice, and, most importantly, provided a safe space where Sarah could be vulnerable, discussing the complexities of her life without judgment. They celebrated her successes and offered solace during the rare moments of doubt. For the first time, Sarah felt truly seen and understood by a circle of peers who valued her character above all else. Patience. Sarah. Eleanor advised one evening, noticing Sarah's restless energy. The wheels of justice turn slowly, but they grind exceedingly fine. Every step we take now is calculated, precise. We are not just taking back what is yours. We are preparing to expose his true character to the world. Eleanor, too, became more than just an aunt. She was Sarah's confidant, her anchor. Their relationship deepened, built on a foundation of shared history, mutual respect, and a quiet, profound love. Eleanor, with her vast experience and sharp wit, continued to offer guidance, but increasingly, she simply offered companionship, a comforting presence in Sarah's ever-evolving life. They would spend evenings discussing everything from global economics to Lily's latest milestones. Their bond growing stronger with each passing day, Sarah spent hours studying corporate reports, legal precedents, and the history of the Vance family's ethical guidelines. Eleanor emphasized that true power wasn't just about wealth, but about how that wealth was wielded. The Vance legacy, she explained, was built on integrity and a commitment to long-term growth, not short-term greed. This resonated deeply with Sarah, who had seen firsthand the destructive power of unchecked avarice in Mark. Sarah also reconnected with a few old friends from before her marriage to Mark, friends who had drifted away as her life became consumed by his demands. They were surprised by her transformation, but quickly embraced the new, confident Sarah. They remembered the vibrant, ambitious woman she had once been and celebrated her return, reminding her of the person she was before Mark had tried to diminish her. These reunions were a poignant reminder that while some relationships were toxic and needed to be shed, others were worth nurturing, offering a comforting link to her past self. As the weeks turned into a couple of months, the legal team completed the intricate process of consolidating Sarah's claim. The vast fortune, once held in complex trusts and hidden accounts, was now firmly under her control. She was no longer just the heir. She was the principal, the ultimate decision-maker for a global empire. The weight of this responsibility was immense, but so was the sense of empowerment. The contrast with her old life was stark. Mark had isolated her, belittled her, and made her feel utterly worthless. He had defined her by her perceived lack of contribution, by her role as just a housewife. But now, Sarah was surrounded by people who uplifted her, who saw her intelligence, her compassion, and her immense capabilities. She realized that Mark's validation had never mattered. Her worth was inherent, an unshakable truth that had simply been obscured by his toxic presence. "We are ready, Ms." Davies announced one morning, her voice devoid of emotion, yet carrying immense power. "All the necessary legal frameworks are in place. You are officially recognized as the sole owner and principal of Vance Global Holdings. We can now proceed with the next phase, the reclamation of your personal assets, and the legal proceedings against Mr. Thompson." She found immense fulfillment in her work, not just in the financial success of Vance Global Holdings, but in the positive impact it had on the lives of its employees and the communities it served. She championed initiatives for education, healthcare, and environmental protection, using the company's vast resources to create tangible change. This sense of purpose, of contributing to something larger than herself, brought a profound joy that no amount of personal luxury could ever provide. Sarah felt a surge of adrenaline, cold and exhilarating. The moment she had been preparing for, the moment of reckoning, was finally at hand. Mark had thought he had won, that he had stripped her of everything. He was about to learn the awful truth that the woman he had scorned was not only far from broken, but was now a force capable of dismantling his entire world. The game had changed, and he was about to be checkmated by the useless housewife he had so foolishly underestimated. Her happiness was quiet, profound, and deeply authentic. It wasn't the fleeting exhilaration of revenge, but the steady glow of self-discovery and empowerment. She had faced the deepest betrayal, endured the harshest realities, and emerged not just intact, but stronger, wiser, and more compassionate. She had built a new life, not just for herself, but for Lily, a life filled with love, security, and endless possibilities. The shadows of her past had faded, replaced by the bright, unwavering light of a future she was now entirely in control of, surrounded by genuine connections and a profound sense of peace. While Sarah meticulously prepared for her grand reclamation, Mark and Emily were basking in what they believed was their triumphant new beginning. The opulent house, once Sarah's domain, was now Emily's playground. She rearranged furniture, threw lavish parties, and flaunted her new status on social media, posting endless photos of herself in designer clothes, sipping champagne by the pool, and posing in front of Mark's expensive sports cars. Mark, for his part, reveled in the adoration, convinced he had made the smartest decision of his life by shedding his useless housewife for a woman who truly understood his ambition. Sarah stood on the expansive balcony of her penthouse office, the city sprawling beneath her like a glittering tapestry. The sun, a fiery orb, dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. In her arms, Lily. Now, a bright-eyed, curious 6-year-old pointed excitedly at the distant lights. "Look, Mommy, so many stars." "Darling, isn't this just perfect?" Emily purred one morning, lounging by the pool in a tiny bikini, scrolling through her phone. No more dreary Sarah, no more baby crying. Just us, living our best life. Sarah smiled, pulling her daughter closer. "Yes, my love. So many stars, and the world is full of possibilities. Just like them." Mark grinned, adjusting his sunglasses. "Couldn't agree more. Babe, freedom never tasted so good. And my business is booming. We're on the cusp of some major deals." He believed his success was entirely due to his newfound focus. unburdened by Sarah's presence. He had completely erased her from his mental landscape, convinced she was probably struggling somewhere, a pathetic reminder of his past. Her journey, from the depths of despair to the pinnacle of power, was a testament to resilience, a story she sometimes still found hard to believe was her own. She had built a new life, not just for herself, but for Lily, a life brimming with love, security, and purpose. Vance Global Holdings, under her visionary leadership, had become a titan of ethical business. Its success measured not just in profits, but in its positive impact on countless lives. Their days were filled with expensive dinners, exclusive club nights, and lavish shopping sprees. Emily's credit cards, linked to Mark's accounts, saw constant use. They bought new cars, designer watches, and booked extravagant vacations. They were living the high life, completely oblivious to the silent, unseen force that was slowly, meticulously tightening its grip around their carefully constructed world. She often reflected on the past, not with bitterness, but with a quiet understanding. Mark's betrayal, once a gaping wound, had become the catalyst for her awakening. He had tried to diminish her, to define her by his own narrow-minded contempt. But in doing so, he had unwittingly set her free. He was still serving his sentence, a forgotten figure in a world he had once believed he controlled. Emily, too, had faded into obscurity, her fleeting ambition unable to withstand the harsh glare of reality. Their downfall was a grim reminder that true power and happiness were never built on deceit or the exploitation of others. The first subtle tremor came innocuously enough. Mark was at a high-stakes business lunch, ready to close a lucrative deal with a new client. He reached for his corporate credit card to pay the bill, only for the waiter to return, a polite but firm expression on his face. "Sir, I'm afraid this card has been declined." Sarah's relationship with David Chen had deepened beyond professional partnership. He was a man of quiet strength and unwavering integrity, who saw her not as an heiress, but as a brilliant, compassionate woman. Their shared values and mutual respect had blossomed into a profound, loving connection. He was a partner in every sense of the word, supporting her dreams, celebrating her successes, and offering a steady hand through life's complexities. Lily adored him, and their home, filled with laughter and warmth, was a testament to the beautiful family they had built. Mark frowned, a flicker of annoyance crossing his face. "Declined. That's impossible. Try it again." The waiter did, with the same result. Mark pulled out another card, then another, all declined. Humiliation washed over him as his client watched, an eyebrow raised. He had to call his assistant to wire money to cover the bill, a deeply embarrassing moment that left a sour taste in his mouth. Her friendships, forged in the crucible of shared experiences, remained strong. The women from her leadership group were her confidants, her cheerleaders, a powerful network of support. Her old friends, who had reconnected with her, reminded her of the girl she once was, grounding her in her past while celebrating her present. "Must be a bank error," he grumbled to Emily that night, dismissing it, "or some glitch in the system. I'll call them tomorrow." And then there was Eleanor. Her eccentric great-aunt, who had once seemed so distant, was now a beloved matriarch, her wisdom and quiet strength a constant source of inspiration. Eleanor had taught Sarah not just about business, but about the true meaning of legacy, a responsibility to use power for good, to protect the vulnerable, and to build a future rooted in integrity. She was a living bridge to Sarah's hidden heritage and a cherished part of her everyday life. But the glitches continued. Emily's shopping spree was abruptly halted when her designer handbag purchase was declined at a high-end boutique. Her face, usually radiant with self-satisfaction, crumpled in confusion and anger. "Mark, my card was declined. This is ridiculous." "What's going on?" Sarah's greatest triumph, however, was Lily. Her daughter was growing into a confident, kind, and intelligent girl, filled with a zest for life. Sarah had ensured that Lily understood her extraordinary heritage, not as a burden, but as a gift to be used responsibly. She taught Lily about philanthropy, about giving back, and about the importance of empathy. Lily knew she was loved unconditionally, a stark contrast to the cold indifference her biological father had shown. Mark called his bank, then his financial advisor. The answers were vague, frustratingly unhelpful. "Temporary hold. Mr. Thompson," they'd say. "Unusual activity. We're investigating." But no one could give him a clear explanation. His accounts weren't empty, but access was being mysteriously restricted. Funds frozen, credit lines mysteriously cut. It was like trying to walk through a door that kept locking itself just as he reached for the handle. As the last sliver of sun dipped below the horizon, casting the city in twilight, Sarah held Lily close, her gaze sweeping across the vast expanse of her empire. It wasn't just buildings and balance sheets. It was a network of people, of innovation, of positive change. She had taken what was rightfully hers, not out of vengeance, but out of a profound need for justice and a fierce determination to build a better world for her daughter. Then came the business setbacks. A crucial partnership Mark had been cultivating for months suddenly fell through. The client, a major corporation, pulled out without explanation, citing unforeseen circumstances and a change in strategic direction. Mark was furious, bewildered. He'd been so close. Her story was one of resilience, of a woman who had been broken and discarded, only to rise from the ashes stronger, wiser, and more powerful than anyone could have imagined. She had found her true worth, not in the validation of others, but in the unwavering strength of her own character. The useless housewife had become a formidable CEO, a loving mother, and an inspiration, proving that sometimes the greatest treasures are hidden in plain sight, waiting for the right moment to be revealed. And the future, for Sarah and Lily, was boundless, illuminated by the bright, unwavering light of their own making. "It's sabotage," he yelled, pacing their living room, running a hand through his perfectly coiffed hair. "Someone is deliberately trying to undermine me." Emily, usually quick to agree, looked increasingly nervous. She had grown accustomed to a certain lifestyle, and these financial hiccups were starting to feel less like glitches and more like a systemic problem. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed Sarah's incredible journey of resilience and triumph, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and give this video a like. We love bringing you stories of hidden strengths and unexpected justice. What part of Sarah's story resonated with you the most? Let us know in the comments below. And while you're here, check out our other videos for more dramatic tales of life's twists and turns. There's always more to explore. Calls from his suppliers became more frequent, more insistent. Payments were delayed, invoices went unpaid, and crucial materials for his projects were suddenly held up. His carefully constructed network of contacts, once so reliable, seemed to be subtly shifting away from him. Calls went unreturned, meetings were mysteriously canceled. It was as if an invisible hand was gently but firmly redirecting the flow of his business, diverting his clients, and drying up his resources.